Welcome to CN Live. This is Cathy Vogan reporting from Canberra on day one of the David McBride trial, wherein the defence argues a duty to the nation surpassing military discipline. The trial of whistleblower David McBride opened on Monday, with the prosecution and the defence sketching out their cases before Justice David Mossop at the Supreme Court in Canberra. McBride, who has served 2 terms in Afghanistan as a lawyer with the Australian Defence Force, the AEDT, has been charged in a 5-count indictment for a trial that is expected to last 3 weeks. The prosecution argued on Monday that McBride broke laws of military discipline by leaking to the Australian media. McBride's lawyers conceded in court that he indeed broke such regulations, but that he had a duty to the nation that superseded military discipline. The trial is shaping up to be a battle between distinct ideas of the military's role in society. Is it to serve the entire community's interests, or is it a law unto itself? In 2014, McBride made internal allegations after learning of murders of Afghan civilians by Australian soldiers. McBride then began leaking evidence to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the national broadcaster, between 2014 and 2016. Australian Major General Justice Paul Brereton began an investigation in May 2016 and made public findings in November 2020 that pointed to credible information about Australian war crimes. The Brereton report accused Australian Special Forces of murdering 39 unarmed Afghans. Nevertheless, in September 2018, McBride was charged with allegedly stealing government property in violation of the Criminal Code Act 1995. In March 2019, he was charged with 3 more alleged crimes in breach of the Defence Act of 1903, as well as unlawfully disclosing a government document, contrary, allegedly, to the Crimes Act of 1914. The question arises as to whom the military actually serves. McBride entered the Supreme Court on Monday morning with his therapy dog, Jake, whom he was allowed to bring into court. He encountered a large crowd of supporters rallying in front of the courthouse. "Today, I serve my country," he told his backers. "The question I have for you, Anthony Albanese, is who do you serve?" Was a quote. Special Counsel Trish MacDonald, who led the government's team of prosecutors, began the day by laying out the military laws she claims McBride violated. MacDonald said the concept of duty in law says it is not in the public interest to reveal classified information to the public. McBride's primary duty, she said, was to follow orders. The accused was a legal officer, she asserted. He was not appointed to inform the press. He contravened his official duty. In fact, there is a public interest in non-disclosure, the prosecutor argued. All defence personnel are required to comply with a general order, which includes a defence instruction, meaning official information must be treated as confidential and not disclosed to non-defence entities, MacDonald told the court. McBride had neither authority nor permission to disclose the information to the media. To do so was not in accordance with McBride's duty. Public release of such information must be approved by the Attorney General, she said. Obedience to command is essential to an effective defence force, the Crown prosecutor said, and disobedience is disruptive. Keeping confidentiality is critical to an ADF lawyer, McDonald further argued, and a core duty of a member of the armed forces is obedience to orders. There is no freestanding duty imposed on members of the ADF to advance the public interest contrary to lawful orders, McDonald told the court. The notion that an ADF member can contravene the law because they believed subjectively that revealing confidential information is in the public interest is inimical to discipline in the ADF, she said. The oath a soldier takes does not allow an ADF member to disobey it because he believes that to do so advances the public interest, McDonald argued. Was the accused allowed to act in the public interest regardless of orders? She asked the court. The ABC broadcast a report in 2017 about the murder of innocent Afghans based on evidence supplied by McBride and a second whistleblower. On June 5th, 2019, the Australian Federal Police raided the ABC's Sydney headquarters for 8 hours and removed files. The Attorney General ultimately decided against prosecuting an ABC journalist, Daniel Oakes, who had worked on the Afghan Files story. In March, 3 years after the Brereton report, the first soldier was charged with murder. In court on Monday, McDonald pointed out the failure of the ABC's challenge to the AFP's search warrant of a media office. And now we'll pass to the defence argument, which asserts that there is a duty beyond the military. Citing case law, the defence methodically laid out the difference between military discipline regulations and civilian criminal law, arguing that McBride had a duty not just to the military that he served, but also to the country. Special counsel Stephen Odgers, the lead barrister for the defence, argued that an ADF soldier takes an oath to the king, whose duty is to uphold the interests of the nation. Therefore, it follows logically that a soldier's duty is not just to the military, but to the interest of society as a whole. Quote, duty of service to the sovereign should be understood as a duty to serve the public, even if it conflicts with an order of the Defence Tribunal, Odgers said. While McBride may have violated the military code, he has not violated civil criminal law, Odgers argued. The former should be determined by military tribunals, he said, and McBride should not be tried in a civil court. We don't accept that following the oath necessarily means following orders, Odgers told the court. We accept that circumstances may occasionally arrive that are contrary to a lawful order. It is up to the jury to determine what was in the public interest. Only a jury can decide that it was acceptable for McBride to expose criminality within the ADF and to prevent inappropriate conduct from occurring and continuing, Odgers argued. There is also a duty to disobey unlawful orders under Section 45 of the Defence Act. Odgers added, the accused had a duty to the administration of justice. The trial continues on Tuesday ahead of jury selection from a pool of 87 potential jurors that will take place from Thursday. On Tuesday morning, the defence will introduce a classified document that testifies to the commission of serious crimes, an example of the circumstances in which McBride's duty as a lawyer was not to obey orders to maintain confidentiality, but to disclose the information. This was Cathy Vogan for day one of David McBride's trial. We'll see you tomorrow, and I will play you some of the speeches that were made outside before all this began. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Duggan. Last week, the United States government served papers through the Australian Federal Police to seize the home of Dan's wife. That will become public shortly. Australia, acting as an agent for the United States government, has issued documents to seize the home at Jamberoo, built largely by the work and efforts of Dan's wife. Can you imagine the psychological impact last week of doing that to a mother of 6 children? So we are not just representing David today. We went through 9 years of coalition government. Corrupt, devious, in many respects, evil government. It was not a government. It was an occupation of our country by a gang of villains. I served in France not more than 20 years after the Second World War. France was going through all of the agonies of occupation, and in our village, I lived away out of Paris. In fact, I lived in the French nuclear research village. I can't go into that why, but collaboration was still an issue in our village. People had to sit elsewhere in church. Now, we had an occupation in this country and we should see what it's about. We're still suffering the wounds of occupation. It's not just the weakness and timidity of the Albanese government, it's the overflow of occupation. And who were the main collaborators? They are over across the lake in the bureaucracy. And they include all the mates appointed to the tribunals by the corrupt government. Now, what has failed to happen is that the national security clique across the lake have remained in place. As Professor James Curran says, the entire skill set of the coalition, the occupation, are still directing our policies, such as in relation to China. Now, so we must see what we're here for. We're here during the overflow of the occupation. We need to support the good members of the governing party, the Labor Party. I recall coming here one freezing morning and seeing a young, heavily pregnant woman holding a placard. I didn't know who she was. She was holding a placard with my face on it. I thought for a while I should be a gentleman and take the placard from her, but I thought I don't want to hold up my own face. That turned out to be my local member, Alicia Payne. Yay. She doesn't get anywhere because she's not aligned. There is something wrong in the Labor Party at the moment. There's something seriously wrong, and we need to support the right people there. I'm not going to get involved in the political issues. I'm too busy trying to help Dan Duggan and his wife and 6 children. What we need to do is to continue the fight all the way during David's prosecution. It's only part of the overflow from the occupation years by that gang who occupied the country. I'm very proud to be here in front of you. I'm very happy not to be in jail myself. Thank you.
Another person whose work in the area of government accountability and social justice has been invaluable is Senator David Shoebridge, and he joins us now.
Thanks very much, Marion. Thank you all for coming out today on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land. We acknowledge this land always was and always will be First Nations land. Don't forget that the government tried to put Bernard in jail. Don't forget they didn't want Bernard saying what he just said. And their response was to prosecute him and put him in jail. And I don't know about you, but I'm glad the community rallied round and Bernard was able to come out and say what he just said there. And we will never forget that this government is now trying to put David McBride in jail. And what's David McBride's crime? His crime is telling the truth about war crimes. That's what his crime is. His crime is being brave and being principled and being decent and not being able to be silent while war crimes are committed by people in Australian military uniform. Now, if that's a crime, then every Australian should be guilty, because you'd hope every Australian stepped up in that moment as a man of principle like David McBride. Let's hear it for David McBride, for the bravery he showed. And as we're seeing another war unfolding in front of our eyes, and we're seeing the reality of the violence of war, surely it's a time for the Australian public to reflect on the importance of truth-telling, the importance of whistleblowers. And indeed, one of those other brave whistleblowers, Julian Assange, is in a UK prison for also telling the truth. And I want to acknowledge John Shipton here, Julian's dad, and the courage of John. But while I acknowledge the bravery of so many whistleblowers, David McBride, Julian Assange, of whistleblowers across the country, there's one person who hasn't shown courage. There's one person who's had the power to end this prosecution and instead has stayed silent and has refused to act. And that's the Federal Attorney General. With literally the flick of his pen, he could stop this prosecution now and not just save David McBride from this prosecution, but send a powerful message to every bureaucrat, every government official, every whistleblower in the country that we value you and we respect you and we'll back you in when you make the brave call. That's why we need this. So thank you for coming out today. Thank you for prizing truth over power. Thank you for prizing decency. Thank you for prizing a person I consider a friend, David McBride, who for no other reason, his dog needs an owner, doesn't he? To come out and be with him. And when I saw that t-shirt as I came in, I saw McBride for Defence Minister. Imagine that. Imagine people with the courage of David McBride being Defence Minister. Imagine how valuable that would be right now. Telling truth to power. Being honest. So let's continue to stay here every day of this trial. Let's continue to support truth. Let's continue to support David, and let's continue to say to the federal government, drop the prosecution, drop the charges. Thanks very much.
I just find that unbelievable. Shame. It's a real shame. And if I was the judge here, I'd be going, why is this person in front of me? Where are the generals that he told who colluded to cover this up?
Yes.
So where are they?
Yes.
Bring them before me and we will deal with them.
Yes.
This was no secret. A lot of people knew what was going on in Afghanistan, and only one person stood up to take it on. And he has, if you have followed it over the years, really sacrificed years of his life, and indeed is now sacrificing his freedom for all of us.
Yes. Shame!
We need more people like him, and obviously if we don't support David, if we don't support Richard Boyle and Julian Assange, then this country is in serious trouble.
Yes.
And we've heard other whistleblowers and what's happened to them. We've had the Bank Royal Commission. What happened about that? Nothing. What's going to happen here is a distraction where we have the whistleblower going to prison. He doesn't deserve to go to prison. He deserves to have a statue put in front of the Supreme Court. To say, these are the people we respect, not your politicians, but the people who are prepared to come and tell the truth.
Yes.
And that's what we need, more of those, and we need to encourage more people, not by prosecuting them, but by honouring them. And so I'd urge you to keep it up week after week. I'm told it's a 3-week trial. We need to all try and remember what's going on here. Let people know, and certainly when it comes to the next election, to vote for people who are going to make change. Thank you.
She'll be saying a few words in support of David. Emma.
So I'm Emma Davidson. I'm your ACT Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Veterans. So I'm your ACT Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Veterans. I'm also the Minister for Justice Health, which means that I'm responsible for the health and well-being of people who end up in our prison system here. And I am really concerned about what's happening here today. Now, it is really important to think about the mental well-being and the support that we provide to veterans after their service. This country spends $122.2 million per day on defence. Through to the 2031-32 financial year, this government is going to spend $47.5 million recruiting more 17 to 24-year-old young people into our defence services. And yet, there are veterans with PTSD as a result of moral injury who cannot access a GP, who cannot access a psychiatrist, who cannot access a psychologist in this city. And what is this government doing? This government is spending all of that money to recruit more people into doing this. Now, I want to be very clear about this. The Labor political party supports this spending. The Liberal political party supports that spending. I want to be very clear. I am a Green. The Greens do not support this. I firmly believe that this prosecution is not in the public interest. More than $1 million was spent up until the start of this year, just getting to the stage where a trial hadn't even started yet. And that cost is going to continue. And for what? This is not in the public interest. This prosecution needs to be dropped, and it needs to be dropped now. I want to thank every single one of you for coming out today and showing your support. You show up every time, and you are always there. And I want to thank you for that.
Someone who knows what it means to be pursued by, to be the victim of unjust pursuit and vindictiveness is Bernard Collaery. Since the case against him was dropped, he has devoted much of his time to supporting others in the same position, and we're thrilled to have him here today. The freedom case is Julian Assange, who was in arbitrary detention for 7 or 8 years and has been sitting in a London jail for the last 5 years awaiting extradition. His father, John Shipton, who is here today, will say a few words. And I just would like to say, although the collateral damage video is not part of Julian's indictment, it is without a doubt not just the embarrassment he has caused the government of the United States, but the evidence of war crimes that has put him in this position. I'd like to invite John Shipton, who has been fighting to save his son's life and freedom.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, David. Friends, where do we start? Afghanistan, 20 years occupation, 250,000 dead. 250,000 dead. $8 billion 46 Australian soldiers sacrificed. Our premier armed force, the SAS, decayed. Are you good with that? Vietnam, 3 countries destroyed entirely. 3 million dead. Are you good with that? The latest obscenity. Are you good with that? Ukraine, 2 million lives ruined, 500,000 young men dead. Are you good with that? David McBride, taking upon his shoulders professional obligation as a lawyer, as an Australian, as a member of the armed forces, writing a report on 39 murders which illuminate for us the decay of the SAS. Is here today on trial. Are you good with that? No! Julian Assange, now 14 years in arbitrary detention of one sort or another. Are you good with that? No! Extradition to the United States can be prevented. The fears that emanate from DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, that the arrangement between the Department of Justice and the Department and the White House forbids the White House asking the Department of Justice in the United States to bring this prosecution to an end. That's what they tell us. 16 Congress people, Senate and House, have written a letter in support of the ending of the prosecution and the dropping of the charges. Now, who would know best? Who would know best how the Congress and the White House and the Department of Justice and the government would work? The Congress people of the United States, or the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Foreign Minister of Australia? Who would know best, I ask you. They addressed their letter to the President of the United States requesting that the charges be dropped. Are you good with that? With the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade deliberately obfuscating what can be done to assist an Australian citizen who has been banged up for 14 years for 30 court cases? I'll tell you a little thing. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has 5,300 employees and billions of dollars a year, and reach into every Western nation through the embassy and through the Directorate of the Australian Signals Directorate and the Australian Secret Intelligence Services, and they place the burden of freedom on Julian Assange, who's alone in a cell in the maximum security prison. Very good with that.
Richard Miles on trial! Put Richard Miles on trial!
Just a final word. We salute those what are called whistleblowers who took their professional obligations and courage on behalf of us. Contemplate that in silence. They took their professional obligations and duty to us on behalf of us. And so they deserve our unfaltering support.
蓝牙已连接。
Get out your notebook. There's more.
If you are a consumer of independent news, then the first place you should be going to is Consortium News, and please do try to support them when you can. It doesn't have its articles behind a paywall. It's free for everyone. It's one of the best news sites out there, and it's been in the business of independent journalism and adversarial independent journalism for over 2 decades. I hope that with the public's continuing support of Consortium News, it will continue for a very long time to come. Thank you so much.